The patrol feels normal right up until it doesn't. A Russian submarine slips into the Mediterranean the way it always has. Quiet transit, minimal exposure, no reason to expect trouble. This sea has carried missions like this for years without incident. Then the assumptions start to unravel. The water feels crowded, even though nothing is visible. Aircraft patterns linger longer than they should. Surface traffic moves with the confidence that suggests foreknowledge rather than coincidence. Signals don't spike. Sonar doesn't scream. There's no dramatic moment where alarms go off. That's what makes it unsettling. Because the danger isn't an incoming torpedo. It's the growing realization that freedom of movement has evaporated without a single hostile act. The submarine isn't being chased or challenged, it's being accounted for. And that's the moment the Mediterranean stops feeling like open water. For decades, Russia used this sea as a pressure valve, a way to project power without committing ground forces, a corridor to Syria, a place where presence alone carried weight, as long as submarines could move without being reliably understood. That condition no longer exists. The sea didn't close with a blockade, it closed quietly. Through patience, through tracking, through a kind of silence that belongs to someone else now. At the center of that shift sits a country most people don't instinctively associate with naval dominance: Italy. Not through loud posturing or dramatic confrontation, but through position and discipline. Choke points watched instead of challenged. Movement noticed instead of interrupted. Pressure applied without escalation. The Mediterranean hasn't turned hostile. It's turned unforgiving. And once a submarine crew starts assuming every maneuver might already be understood, the mission changes before a single order is given. That's the real danger, because a sea you can enter but can't trust is no longer a sea you control. And this is where the story actually begins. For years, the Mediterranean solved a problem Russia couldn't fix anywhere else. It gave Moscow reach without commitment. From this sea, Russia could touch NATO's southern flank without crossing a border. It could support operations in Syria without exposing its Black Sea fleet directly. It could remind Europe that Russian submarines didn't stop at the Bosphorus. And most importantly, it could do all of that quietly. A single submarine slipping through the Mediterranean didn't need to fire a missile to matter. Its presence alone forced navies to plan differently. Convoys changed routes, surveillance aircraft flew longer. Commanders had to assume something unseen was nearby. That uncertainty was the weapon. As long as Russian boats could move without being reliably tracked, the Mediterranean stayed useful. It didn't have to be controlled, it just had to stay unpredictable. That worked when undersea awareness was uneven. It works far less well when geography turns against you. Because the Mediterranean is an open ocean. It's a sequence of doors, and every door has someone standing next to it. The Strait of Sicily, the Adriatic entrance, the channels between Italy, Malta, and North Africa. Russian submarines don't pass through these areas by choice. They pass through them because there is no alternative. And every transit leaves a signature, even when nothing appears on sonar. That's the problem Russia is running into now. Not interception, not confrontation, persistence. Italian naval planners don't need to chase Russian submarines across the sea. They only need to know where they must go. Once you understand that, tracking becomes a matter of time instead of luck, and time favors the defender. Italy sits at the center of this geometry, not as a distant observer, but as the country whose coastline and patrol zones intersect almost every meaningful route a submarine has to take. This creates a quiet asymmetry. Russia can send a submarine into the Mediterranean. Italy can watch it enter, watch it maneuver, and watch it leave. No drama, no escalation. Just awareness stacking on awareness until the submarine's greatest advantage, uncertainty, starts to dissolve. And that's where the balance shifts. Because submarines don't thrive when they're merely undetected. They thrive when they're unknown. When no one is sure they're there at all. Once tracking becomes persistent, even without contact, the mission changes. Routes get conservative, speed drops, loitering becomes risky. Aggressive positioning starts to feel reckless. The submarine is still armed. Still capable, still dangerous, but it's no longer free. This is the part Russian doctrine wasn't built for. Submarines were meant to operate in oceans wide enough to hide mistakes. The Mediterranean doesn't offer that luxury anymore, and Italy has spent years preparing to exploit exactly that constraint. Not with louder ships, not with dramatic shows of force, but with a kind of undersea patience that slowly closes options without firing a shot. And once a submarine crew starts assuming every move is observed, the entire logic of presence breaks down, which leads directly to the next problem Russia didn't anticipate. Because awareness alone isn't what changed the game, silence did. Russia's problem isn't that Italy watches the Mediterranean, it's that Italy listens to it better than almost anyone else. Submarine warfare has always been sold as a contest of hardware, whose boat is quieter, whose sonar is stronger, whose crew is better trained. That framing misses the real shift that's been happening quietly in the central Mediterranean. Italy stopped thinking about submarines as hunters. It started treating them as terrain. The backbone of this approach is the Italian Navy's latest generation of boats, built around the Italian Navy's undersea doctrine and the U-212 NFS program. These submarines weren't designed to chase Russian vessels across the sea. They were designed to sit in the right places for long periods without announcing themselves at all. This matters because the Mediterranean punishes noise more harshly than open ocean ever could. In deep water, sound dissipates. In confined seas, it reflects, it bounces, it stacks. Every maneuver leaves an acoustic fingerprint that doesn't vanish quickly. The quieter platform isn't just harder to detect, it reshapes how everyone else has to behave. Italian submarines don't need to sprint, they don't need to maneuver aggressively, they don't need to transmit often. They wait, and waiting is devastating to an opponent that relies on uncertainty. Russian submarines operating in the Mediterranean, especially older diesel-electric boats like the Kilo-class submarine, were designed to exploit moments of confusion. Slip through, reposition, disappear again. That model assumes gaps. It assumes imperfect coverage. It assumes that if you stay quiet long enough, someone will eventually look elsewhere. Italy's approach denies that assumption. Instead of trying to find Russian submarines once they're already loose, Italian forces focus on persistence. Knowing where a submarine must transit, knowing which depths favor which speeds, knowing how long a diesel-electric boat can afford to stay submerged before trade-offs appear. This isn't about dramatic intercepts. It's about narrowing choices. Once a Russian submarine commander starts factoring Italian presence into every movement decision, the submarine stops being an offensive tool and starts becoming a liability that must be managed carefully. Do you loiter and risk pattern exposure? Do you move and risk acoustic detection? Do you surface or snorkel and risk being noticed by aircraft? Every option costs something, and the more those costs accumulate, the less effective the submarine becomes as a strategic signal. This is where silence turns from protection into pressure. Italian submarines don't announce dominance, they imply it. They create a background condition where Russian crews never quite know if they're alone. That uncertainty forces conservative behavior. Conservative behavior shrinks operational space. Shrinking space turns presence into constraint. By the time a Russian submarine reaches its patrol area, it's already spent most of its advantage just getting there. And that's the part that rarely shows up in headlines. No explosions, no standoffs, no dramatic footage. Just missions that feel smaller than planned, shorter than intended, less useful than advertised, which leads to the final problem for Russia in the Mediterranean. Because once submarines stop creating uncertainty for the enemy, they start creating certainty for everyone else. And certainty is how seas quietly close. Here's the moment where the story usually turns optimistic. This is where people expect Russia to adapt, to field a counter, to flip the equation the way large militaries usually do. But underwater, that logic breaks. Because Russia's Mediterranean problem isn't tactical, it's structural. Russian submarines in the Mediterranean are built around a specific idea of war. Short ambush windows, coastal concealment, limited patrol zones where silence and surprise matter more than endurance. That doctrine worked when detection was rare and tracking was episodic. That world doesn't exist anymore. Once Italian and Allied sensors assume presence rather than wait to discover it, the Russian submarine stops being a hunter and starts being a variable that must be managed carefully. Every choice it makes becomes defensive. Stay shallow and you risk exposure. Go deeper and you lose the ability to influence the surface fight. Slow down and you preserve silence but give up relevance. Reduce patrols and you stay safer but stop shaping anything at all. None of those choices restore advantage. They only reduce risk at the cost of usefulness. This is the trap. Russia can change how its submarines behave, but every adjustment makes them matter less. And unlike land warfare, there is no rapid iteration cycle underwater. You can't jury-rig a new tactic in weeks. You can't rotate in experimental crews. You can't flood the zone with cheap systems and learn in public. Submarine warfare moves at the speed of design cycles, training pipelines, and hull availability. Years, not months. That's why Russia can't simply surge fresh submarines into the Mediterranean to reset the balance. Every transit route into the basin is watched. Every choke point is narrow. Every movement exposes patterns that don't disappear once they're seen. The Mediterranean isn't big enough to hide mistakes for long, so Russia is left with an uncomfortable reality. Its submarines can still exist there. They just can't dominate. They can still patrol. They just can't roam freely. They can still threaten in theory, but in practice they're boxed into caution. And in naval warfare, caution is not a neutral state. It's decline. Because submarines don't project power by being present. They project power by being unpredictable. Once predictability sets in, silence stops being a weapon and becomes a liability. This is why the problem doesn't go away next year, and why no single counter fixes it. Russia isn't losing submarines in the Mediterranean at scale. It's losing options. And losing options is how strategic pressure builds quietly, without battles, without headlines, and without a clear moment you can point to and say, "That's when it turned." By the time it's obvious, the sea is already closed. By now, the pattern should be clear. Russia didn't lose the Mediterranean because Italy or NATO shut it down with force. It lost it because the sea stopped being permissive. A closed sea doesn't need minefields. It doesn't need blockades. It doesn't even need constant contact. It only needs to make movement expensive. That's what Italy's undersea posture does. When Russian surface ships move through the central Mediterranean, they do it under persistent observation. Maritime patrol aircraft, allied sensors, predictable choke points. That's already uncomfortable, but surface ships can at least signal presence, posture, and intent. Submarines don't have that luxury. Their value comes from ambiguity, from the threat that they might be somewhere. Once that ambiguity collapses, the deterrent value collapses with it. Italian submarines don't need to intercept Russian boats to neutralize them. They only need to exist in enough places, quietly enough, for Russian planners to assume they're there. That assumption spreads upward. Commanders shorten patrols. Routes become conservative. Deployment windows shrink. Eventually, the submarine stops shaping the battle space and starts consuming resources just to stay alive. This is why Russia's Mediterranean posture has steadily thinned without a single decisive naval battle. Reports of Russian submarines cycling out of the region or operating under constant surveillance aren't signs of tactical failure. They're signs of strategic discomfort. A force that feels watched doesn't posture aggressively. A force that feels constrained doesn't escalate. A force that can't maneuver freely can't credibly threaten. Italy's role in this isn't flashy, and that's the point. By anchoring NATO's undersea awareness in the central Mediterranean, Italy turns geography into leverage. The Adriatic, the Tyrrhenian, the approaches to Sicily, these aren't just bodies of water, they're filters. Every movement passes through layers of listening, tracking, and inference. And once those layers exist, they don't switch off. This is what makes the situation irreversible in the short term. Russia can rotate ships, it can redeploy crews, it can announce presence. What it can't easily do is rebuild acoustic surprise in a sea where quiet adversaries already own the listening space. That's why the Mediterranean feels smaller to Moscow every year. Not because it's physically closed, but because it's mentally constrained. When submarines stop being hunters and start feeling hunted, doctrine breaks down quietly. Missions get safer, objectives get narrower, risk tolerance drops. From the outside, everything looks normal. From the inside, the sea feels hostile. Italy didn't slam the door on Russia's Mediterranean ambitions. It simply made sure the room is never dark again. And in submarine warfare, light is lethal. That's the real shift. Not escalation, not confrontation, but control. Exercised so quietly that by the time it's noticed, there's nothing left to contest.